week. All right, so we're live. Okay, and now share the screen. All right, everyone. So welcome and thank you very much for your patience. We're delighted to introduce our speaker tonight, Michael Burke. Michael and I met virtually about nearly 2 years ago now, and he was doing fantastic work on this fascinating character, Launt Thompson, or Lancelot Thompson. And so I think you'll be very interested to hear about the life and the kind of tragic end of this artist. Michael is working closely with the group in Ireland, so he'll tell you about that himself, and come all the way up from tonight. Will everyone else on Zoom, if you would mind muting yourself, that would be great, just so that we're not flicking in and out with other noises. So here you go. This is your little arrow, or the space bar, and thanks very much, everyone.
My name is Michael Burke. I just wanted to give a little explanation of how this all started. All four of my grandparents were born in Ireland, but when I was growing up in New York City, we weren't very Irish at all. We didn't really have any connection. And then as I got older, I started doing some exploring on Irish history, Irish culture, and I found that there was a lot more that I didn't know. And especially in the literature area. So I started doing research, and my interest became Irish-born Americans who were successful, maybe famous, or achieved things, and now nobody knows who they are. And I found that I had enough material for the rest of my life. So I started with a writer named Fitzjames O'Brien. And when I started going around to different Irish places in New York City, the Irish American Stargell Institute, places, Glucksman Island House, nobody knew who Fitzjames O'Brien was. He was born in 1826 in Cork, and to a wealthy Irish Catholic family. That's really, I think, a minority at the time. When he came of age, he inherited 50,000 pounds, which in those days probably would have, kept him going for the rest of his life. But instead, he went to London and blew the whole thing in 2 years. So this was the kind of person he was. That's why I started researching him, because he was just an interesting character. He was frequently involved in brawls and fistfights and arrested and things like that. And he was constantly challenging people to duels. And but he wrote some fantastic material. Much of which I had never heard of, but his imagination was just incredible. And when I first mentioned him to Glucksman Island House, some of the professors whom I knew, they all said, "We don't know who he is." And now he's part of the curriculum there, because he wrote some of these. They read his stories. We said, "We never saw this," So they read his stories, and now he's part of it. Now he was one of what they called the Bohemians. And they were in like 1850s New York. They were like the avant-garde, or later I think they were called beatniks or hippies or whatever. They were just like on the fringe. And they used to hang around in a bar named Pfaff's, which, if I'm pronouncing that right, it's P-F-F-A-F or F or something. It was obviously a German bar. And it was in the basement where they hung out. And the building is still there. It's on Broadway and Waverly Street. It's a shoe store now. And where they used to hang out in their table in the restaurant is shoe supplies. So anyway, when I was doing research for him, I went into all of his friends and associates and other people, and one of them that came up was Launt Thompson. And he was dismissed by later historians as being a promising artist, but really just a drunk. And so I took it at face value, and I said, all right, I'm just not even going to bother with him. But then later on, I found out that he was born in Ireland. So then it was automatically he came into my niche, my sphere. And I wanted to investigate him. And when I did, it was like, okay, I could get close. Yeah, there we go. A little dark. I need that. That's my notes. Hmm? Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So when I looked into Launt Thompson, it was like the whole thing exploded in my face. And he wasn't just a drunk, he was this phenomenal sculptor that we lost. We just lost track of him. And so I'm going to just do some of the chronology, but I wanted to explain how this also happened. I did an article in Irish American magazine on him entitled "Whatever Happened to Launt Thompson," which was kind of half humor. But and I said, when I had the article published, I said I don't have all the information on him. I probably won't. But that's all right.
Try and get yourself closer. Are you guys seeing?
I can't see. Where should I stand? Here. Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. Come in as close as you can.
Yeah, I can see that. So anyway, I had published this article, and some people from his hometown, which is Abbeyleix in County Laois. Am I pronouncing that right? Yeah. I know when you read it, it doesn't sound anything like Laois. It sounds like Laos or something. So anyway, they contacted my publisher, Patricia Hardy. And she contacted me, and she said, these Irish guys want to get in touch with you. And she said, it's up to you. You want to talk to them, fine. And I said, yeah, I'll talk to anybody. So I contacted them, and their interest was they had this organization trying to promote their town, because of all the Irish towns and tourism and everything, they were just completely overlooked. And they had a website, they had a little video, and I looked at the town. It was a really nice, beautiful, quaint kind of town, and just a classic town. But they said one of their problems was they had nobody from their town that ever amounted to anything. And now along comes Launt Thompson, who nobody knew was this fantastic sculptor. And so these guys said to me, well, we wanted to promote our town. And we got into this whole thing, and we started working on putting together an art exhibit. We're going to start here and go over to Ireland. And the Irish government was supposed to pay for it. And they had agreed to pay, I think it was 50,000 euros. And then I think the whole economy crashed or something along with this. So anyway, we've been, in suspension for a couple of years, and everybody was in on this. There was the president of Ireland, the Higgins. He approved of it, and ministers were approving, everybody was approving of it, but nobody had any money. So we had everything all set up, and I did a lot of work. I found where not all, but a lot of Thompson's work was. And most people didn't know who did this. They walked by the statue, had no idea who did it. And I figured it all out. I even went down to doing a budget, how much it's going to cost to go to all these places. Luckily, they're all in upstate New York, New England, as far down as Washington, but not anywhere else except one place, one town by the Canadian border, which was going to be a problem. But otherwise, we could do it in one couple of days with a car. So we're all ready for it. We're waiting. But anyway, that's as far as I got now, and that's why we're doing this. And I'm still in touch with them. I was interviewed by Dr. Miriam Nyhan from NYU, and it was published. I mean, it was broadcast in New York and simultaneously in Ireland. And of course, I said nice things about Abbeyleix, And I got calls. My phone was ringing off the hook with, oh, you're a friend of ours. We're gonna do this. And the interview actually went very well because of Dr. Nyhan, not because of me. And my brother is my late brother. He was a professor at Hunter College, and he heard it and he said, boy, she kept you in line, because I have a tendency to just ramble on, and anyway, that worked out very well. So we still have that. It's still available if anybody wants to hear it. But anyway, and now I just want to talk about the chronology of Thompson's life, but more interesting is the little anecdotes that came into, and he was, first of all, he's had this weird personality that everybody who met him liked him, and they stayed liking him. He didn't make any enemies. He made friends everywhere he went. And he started out, he was born in Ireland in 1833, Abbeyleix. They have the site where he was born, which the house is gone. It's now a field. So, and his father died 1847. He was, I think, 15, 14. And his mother decided that she couldn't keep the farm. So she and his brother, her two sons, they came over to New York. And then when they came to New York, they went straight to Albany, which this is 1848. Now, usually at that time, that was like the height of the hunger. And usually at that time, if somebody left New York City that was coming from Ireland, they had some connection to the place where they were going, because most Irish showed up in New York City and didn't know anything about where they were going or America or anything. And she had some connection. I haven't yet found out what it was. But she came up here. He had an average childhood. He went to school. He did okay, I guess, at school. I didn't heard anything about him one way or the other, because you wouldn't hear anything about a grammar school kid or high school kid. But then when he finished school, he was thinking about being a doctor. And luckily, he became an office boy for a Dr. and Professor Ormsby, who was a professor at the State Medical School in Albany. And he liked him, and he took him on as a employee. And then he noticed that Thompson had started doing all these sketches. Now, this was when the Hudson River School was starting, which Albany was the center of it. And he did landscapes. Now, some of his landscape sketches are still in the Albany Museum, which I haven't had a chance to get to yet, mainly because for a couple of years I couldn't walk very well, numerous accidents. So, but his collection is there. So Ormsby showed them to some art friends of his, and just at that time, Thompson started studying anatomy, which is like medical school 101. It's the first thing you're going to study if you're going to be a doctor, is anatomy. And he found that he was more interested in the human form, like drawing it and sculpting it, than in healing it. So he switched, and he went to Dr. Ormsby, who, instead of being mad at him and throwing him out, he was like encouraging him. And he said, and he hooked him up with a sculptor named Erastus Dow Palmer, who was the major sculptor in the Albany area at the time. Thompson stayed with him for 9 years as an apprentice. He started out sweeping the floor, dumping the garbage and stuff, and then he finally worked his way up to assistant to Palmer. And after 9 years, he was a really good sculptor. And most of his work that he specialized in the beginning of his career were these medallion portraits, which were profiles done in marble. There's some of them are still around. There's one of them in a church in Manhattan on Madison Avenue and 35th Street, the Church of the Incarnation. It's right on the wall. It's Admiral Farragut, if you ever heard of him. He was the Civil War admiral who had the famous quote, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, and he went right into this battle. And it seems that we learned later he never really said that. It was like legend. Um, but anyway, that was one of his portraits that's still around. He has some in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, where I've been associated with for years. And that's how he started to make a living. So he came down to New York. Again, this is like he had a lucky life. He got a studio in a new building called the 10th Street Studio Building, which was the first building ever built for artists. And he got a studio. It was like really coveted space, but he somehow managed to get a space in there. You couldn't live there, you could only work there. So he had an apartment which he shared with another aspiring artist named James Pinchot. I'm going to digress for a second, and this is kind of Irish American history, maybe trivia or whatever, but they became fast friends. Now, Pinchot's father, Cyril Pinchot, had come from France. He was a fairly wealthy family, and but after the Battle of Waterloo, he served in Napoleon's army as a teenager, probably not for very long, but he idolized Napoleon, which is kind of odd because a lot of French people didn't even like him, some hated him, but he just idolized Napoleon. So he had Thompson do a statue of Napoleon. No. How do I get this to go? That's it, yeah. Now, how does that go up here? Okay. Okay. Now, he had founded with some other people this town of Milford in Pennsylvania. It's right in the Poconos. It's still there. Now, Cyril had commissioned this statue, and if you get a chance to look at it.
Keep talking,
he liked it, Cyril liked it, a lot of art critics liked it. They made a copy of it, and it was exhibited in Paris. And but the people of Milford hated it because they said it was a European despot, and they were a democratic American town, and they didn't want him anywhere near there. Now, okay, now we see it. When I saw this, I just thought, like, I don't know if I'd want a statue of that guy in my town because he's like depressed. This is after he lost Waterloo, and he wasn't doing well. His head is down. He's a little bit out of shape, looks like, and he's walking with a little bit of a stoop. And anyway, they rejected it completely. I think they put a fountain up instead or something. And but the Metropolitan Museum of Art wanted it, and the Pinchot family gave it to him. Eventually, they gave it to the Smithsonian, who own it today. Now, this statue is in gray towers. James Pinchot was an aspiring artist with Launt Thompson. Launt Thompson became successful. James didn't, but he went into the wallpaper business and made a fortune. And he built this huge mansion it's called now Great Towers. And it was for his family, and I think his brother lived there. They bought acres and acres of land, and they developed a lot of land in Pennsylvania and made even more money. The Pinchots then moved to Park Avenue in Manhattan, and they had huge apartments there. James, none of them ever really worked at anything. They all had degrees and law degrees and stuff, but none of them ever held a job. But they just lived off their family fortune. And the house, Thompson was a frequent guest at the house because of his friendship with James. And that's probably where he did some of this. Now, the statue, the house is now a museum. It's owned by the Forestry Service. And the first floor is just artwork. There's this statue, and I think there's two or three others of Launt Thompson. One of them is Edwin Booth as Hamlet, and there's another one I think is William Cullen Bryant. So he had several casts of his famous statues. So now the interesting kind of twist on this is James Pinchot's granddaughter, they were all socialites, and his granddaughter had a house in Georgetown, and she was married and divorced, and she was living in this house, and she used to go out exercising. Now, jogging. Now, she was, everybody knew about this, but nobody admitted it, that she had a long-standing affair with John Kennedy. And there's books written about it. There's, nonfiction books, and there's fiction books. But then one day, she was found dead murdered on the jogging trail. The crime was never solved. Her brother-in-law was Ben Bradley, who was a very big newspaper man. He was the head of the Washington Post. And when she died, he got a notice from somebody that said, get rid of her diaries. So I don't know whether he did it or not. They don't know for sure. But, her diaries disappeared, and whether he did it or not. So anyway, that's kind of another tie that Thompson has to the Irish. So he came down to New York, lived the bachelor's life. He used to give a party every week in his studio, and he'd have all his literary friends over, and and Edwin Booth and all these people, and some of them went on to become fairly well known in letters, and then he became successful. And his first success, which was actually before Napoleon, was the Grizzly Adams. I don't know if you ever remember this TV show. I can remember it when I was a kid. Grizzly Adams was a trapper, and he had this reformation or epiphany or something, and he decided at some point he would never hurt another animal, and he became a showman training bears, and Launt Thompson did his portrait bust, which now is lost. He's probably still in marble. This was before they started doing bronze. Probably got knocked over, and that was it. So, but it got him into the National Academy of Design, which was one of the most prestigious places, and it still was up until a few years ago. It was founded by Samuel Morse, the Morse code, but he also was an artist, and he had this hatred of Irish people, all Irish people, except for Launt Thompson. And Launt Thompson was like one of his proteges, and for years there was in the entrance a bust of Morse done by Launt Thompson, And now the place closed up, and I don't know, something happened. They just had to close up all of a sudden, and I went to go back to try to get a picture of it, and nobody was even answering the phone. And it's a huge mansion right across the street from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So I don't know what happened to it, what happened to the artwork.
Was that in the American Irish Historical Society?
It's up the block from that, right across the street. Yeah. The American Irish Society is right across the street. Yeah. I think that's for sale now. I don't know. Yeah. I've been there many times, and matter of fact, I was supposed to talk there, and then the pandemic hit, so I got bumped. So, and now they're selling it, so I didn't. They haven't called me back. But so that was his first thing that got him recognition. This Napoleon got him recognition all over, and he started getting commissions from all over. Now this is in the 1870s. Something's coming on. And he got one commission after another. And when I was doing research on him, it seemed like he never took a day off. When he wasn't doing an official commission for the government or something, he was doing private busts. And he made so much money that, and I think it's 1862 or something. What was it? No, sorry, 1868. He went to Europe on a tour with his friends. One of them was Church, the landscape painter, and all these other Hudson River School painters from around here. They all went through Paris, Milan, Florence, and especially Florence he really liked because there was a lot of Michelangelo work there. Then he came back a year later, and then he had a kind of a turning point in his life. The president of Union College which is not far from here, it's Schenectady. Uh, his his he had one of his faculty was a soldier, an officer in the Civil War, and he was killed. So he wanted a statue of him and a bust, just a bronze bust, and he called Launt Thompson to come up. Now, Knott's granddaughter lived with him. Now, she was the daughter of an Episcopal bishop, and she had 6 brothers, but when she was born, her mother died giving her birth. And the bishop, was a very highly respected guy and everything, but bishops tend not to be that wealthy, and he needed help raising his daughter. Plus, he couldn't do it himself, and the grandparents stepped in, and this was the best thing that ever happened to her. Her name was Potter, Maria Louisa Potter. She was called Molly, and in those days, women didn't get much of a chance at higher education at all here. Anything you could maybe train to be a teacher if you were lucky, but nothing for really the esoteric arts and sciences. So he made sure, and his wife, that she got one of the best educations ever. She knew all the classics. She knew Greek and Latin. She was fluent in French and Italian, and she knew history and mathematics and cultural history and the whole thing. So she was living with him. Launt Thompson comes up to do the portrait of this professor, and within a year they're married. Love at first sight, or I don't know what, but they came back down to New York, and his career just blossomed even more, and he was doing so well that in 1875, after doing a whole lot of other artwork, they moved to Florence, Italy. Prior to this, he had been commissioned to do a portrait for a full-size standing portrait for West Point of a Major General John Sedgwick. If you go to West Point now, it's on the official tour. Now, when I was working on the art exhibit, we wanted to go and take a picture, and I went to every place where all Thompson's work was to get permission, because I didn't want to take any chances. So when I went to West Point, they said, and the photographer that was going to take the pictures was an Irish photographer, and one of my Irish colleagues was going to be with him. And they said, foreign nationals are not allowed in West Point unless they're accompanied by someone from the State Department. So I said, I guess that couldn't be me, huh? And she said, not a chance. So I went all around, and I was talking to colonels, generals, everybody, and everybody said no chance. So my brother John, who's very knowledgeable about a lot of these things, he said, why don't you try the public relations department? Everybody has a public relations department. I said, let's try it. So this is another serendipitous thing. I got a hold of the head of the public relations. Her name was Kelly. Yeah, you know where this is going. Her father and her mother were both involved in Irish organizations. The father was the Ancient Order of Hibernians, from where they came from the Midwest. And I told her the whole story and everything. And she said, when you're ready to come, and she gave me her private email, her private cell phone. She said, when you're ready to come, contact me. I'll meet you at the gate. I'll take you in, and you can take all the pictures you want, and I'll take you out. So we're still waiting, okay? But and there's a lot of these little kind of anecdotes. And to go back just a little bit retro, when he was a young man before he married, he was very good friends with Edwin Booth. And Edwin Booth had a house on Gramercy Park, which is a really nice section of Manhattan, if you know it. And it's now the Players Club. He donated when he died. It was in his will. And when Edwin Booth's brother was John Wilkes Booth, the bad apple of the family. And when he shot Lincoln, and then he was on the lam for a while, the whole country, well, half the country, wanted to get him. The other half of the country wanted him to get away. but the half the country wanted to get him. And people came and they thought Edwin had something to do with it, which he was proven beyond a doubt he didn't. He had nothing to do with it. He hardly knew John Wilkes at all. But they were outside his house, throwing rocks at him and stuff, and getting threats under the door. And his mother, John Wilkes Booth and Edwin Booth's mother, was there with them. And there was another writer named Aldrich. And Launt Thompson and Aldrich were just trying to cheer Edwin up, which was like almost impossible because he thought his career was over. And, in a way, he probably had a lot, he was right in a lot of ways. But it turned out that it wasn't. But it happened that Edwin's sister became ill. She was like chronically sick, and she became really ill. And the mother had to go down to Philadelphia to her, and they couldn't get her out. We couldn't walk out the front door. You get hit with a rock. So they decided that Launt Thompson should take her out through the back alleys, backyards, and sneak her into a cab. And I don't know how he did it. Launt Thompson was very short, so they may have dressed him up as a woman or something. It looked like two women walking down the street. And they got a cab. They got across town. They got the ferry. They got to the train station. He put Mrs. Booth in the seat, and when he put her down, he heard the newsboy yelling that John Wilkes Booth was killed. So he went running out to get the newspaper, and partially because he figured that she's going to have to know, she'll be known in a few minutes, and he rather that she got it from him. And so he went out and he got the newspaper, he brought it in, and he showed it to her. He said, sorry. And she said, this is really good, because now he's not going to be arrested, tried, which he's not going to do well with at all, and hung, which is going to be a disgrace for our whole family. And she thanked him for, giving her the news. So, and then he and Booth became friends for life. And when he was having trouble later on, Booth helped him out financially. He paid for his asylum. So anyway, the Thompsons went to Europe, and they stayed in Florence, and he was there for 6 years. They had one son here in New York, whose name was also Lancelot, but they had sense enough to call him Lance and not Launt. So and then they had two daughters there in Italy. Now, the Mrs. Thompson, because she was fluent in Italian, got along with the local people, and they became like the social center for anybody from America, particularly New York, that came to Florence, went to their house, either for lunch or for dinner or to stay overnight sometimes, and they became the social center for Americans. But then they were doing very, very well, and it was the high point of her life. She loved being a hostess. And that's when something went wrong, and we don't know yet what it is. Hopefully someday we will know. But apparently she asked him to leave. He came back here. Now, he had joined a lot of the prestigious clubs, the Lotus Club, which is still around, the Century Club, which is still around. And he kind of, destroyed rooms there, and he just went crazy, and he just started causing all kinds of problems. They threw him out. And I remember I spoke with the curator at the Century, and they have 6 of his pieces there. One of them is a real magnificent piece, which I don't have a picture of. It's called The Eagle on the Globe. I think it was kind of a patriotic thing. It was a American eagle on a globe, maybe America, ruling the world kind of thing. And it's on the top of the stairway in the entrance to the club. The club is a beautiful marble building on 5th Avenue and 46th Street. So I went there, and the curator, I said, he said, you can come anytime. I'll get the statues down for you. We'll let you take whatever pictures you want. So I said, that's very nice of you, considering that you threw them out. And they said, well, we don't hold grudges. That was 150 years ago. So then after that, COVID came and the whole place closed down for a while. Now I believe it's opening up again. So anyway, he was thrown out of all his clubs. He went to a hotel. Things just got bad to worse, to worse, to worse. And nobody knows exactly what happened. I mean, I have a friend who's a psychiatrist, and I went over the whole thing with him, and he said, well, maybe he hit his head. Who knows? It sounds to me like, I don't know anything about psychiatry or psychology, but it sounds to me like he was bipolar, because he would work for weeks on different projects, and then he would, just go crazy. And a lot of times, then he started drinking. And I think, this was pre-medication days. I think he thought drinking would, be like a med for him or something. And it didn't work, of course, and that just made things worse. And then he would have drinking binges, but then he would go back to work. And I'm going to try this again. Okay, this one here, I'm not sure who this is. I think this is Morgan, one of his commissions. This is the one in West Point, General Sedgwick. But another kind of aside with General Sedgwick, he was supposed to have been a real good general, because a lot of the generals were not so good. And he was getting ready for the battle, and there were snipers around. And his aides said, he was like up on horse, getting everything ready and encouraging his troops and everything. And the aides said, maybe you should get down a bit because there's snipers around. And he said, oh, they couldn't hit an elephant from there. Right after he said that, he was shot in the head and killed. So Launt Thompson got the commission to do the statue, but also, you can't see it from here, he did a relief of the actual death of the general, which he threw in for free, I guess. And at the same time, too, he also did Winfield Scott, general from the Civil War, who founded the soldiers, which it was called the Old Soldiers' Home, then it was the Soldiers and Airmen's Home. It's still in Washington. That's what I think it is now, Retired Soldiers' Home. Congress commissioned Thompson to do that. Congress. And they paid him $15,000. And this was the 70s, early 70s. Most workers were making maybe $1,500 a year, and he was paid $15,000 for one work. They said it was, up until that time, the most expensive commission that Congress ever did. And he, and this, this of course, it's still there. It's on the entrance to go into the museum. And I called them. The old folks' home. And I called them, and I said, "Can we come?" And they said, "Sure." But we haven't gotten a chance to get down there yet. This is one of his friends, Stanford. This is William Cullen Bryant. And this is one that was commissioned in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. It's called the Color Bearer. This is the head of, this was a founder, Pearson, Abraham Pearson. He was a rector. He was a founder of Yale. Thompson did his commission. The statue is still there, and it's still on display. And I called them, and they said, you can come take a picture anytime. And Yale was so happy with it, they gave him an honorary MFA degree. He had never taken an art class in his life. Now these are some of the medallions that he used to do. The one on the right is Pinchot's granddaughter, I think. Not the one that had the affair, the other one. I think it's her sister, or maybe it was her aunt. And the one on the left was an American consul general to Florence who died there, and this is his grave. Launt Thompson did his. So this is the only nude he ever did. He worked on this for about 20 years. He finished it in Europe. Now, when he was in Europe, he was taking on commissions from New York. He would do them in Europe. Now, he claimed that he went to Europe because everything was cheaper there. The employees were cheaper, stone was cheaper. He could go right out and pick out whatever stone he wanted from the quarry, and the help was cheap. So it was cheaper for him to have the stones, have everything brought over there, do it, and ship it back to New York. And this is General DuPont, Admiral DuPont from the Better Living Through Chemistry family, and the family didn't like this statue because they just didn't like the style. So it was on DuPont Circle in Washington, which used to be a big drug place, and then now it's in a park in Wilmington. Okay, this is the last piece he did. It's the only equestrian he ever did. This got such good reviews, and even some of the critics said like the way he did the horse showed the feeling that he had. Now this this was General Burnside. His only claim to fame was he had hair coming down here, and it later became sideburns. And he was pretty much hated. He was an arms dealer and low-level politician. So now this is in front of the city hall in Providence, Rhode Island. I think he was mayor of Providence or something. And I called them, and they had no idea who the artist was or anything. And I said, "Can we come take a picture?" They said, "Sure. Could let us know. We want to come out and see it." But now all sorts of protesters come out there and they throw paint on the horse and throw paint on him, and then they come and clean it up. So we were hoping we would get there when it was a mild off protest day. So after he did this, he was committed to an asylum. Somebody who does something like this, I think it was a month or two later, goes into an asylum for a one-way trip where he spent the rest of his life. Something, didn't really add up. And even when he was in the asylum, he was doing work for the head of the asylum, or whatever you want to call him. And, he made friends there. So, this is kind of just an overview. I have brought a lot of the articles that were written by me, and also Liz Allen, who I guess she was trying to make it here. She's a historian, an art historian with SUNY, and she wrote a really comprehensive article on all of Thompson's work. That's here for anybody who wants it. And the last thing was when I called his cemetery, the first thing they told me was that his grave was unmarked. So, and they also told Liz Allen, because she has it in her article, that his grave is unmarked. I told my Irish friends or partners or whatever, and they were outraged, and they said, we have to get a statue up, something up of him, a stone up. So I called back again, and I don't know, whoever answered the phone didn't know what they were talking about. And I got the director of the board, the chairman of the board, and he was a psychiatrist himself, Dr. Mills. And he said, "No, there's a stone there." And this is Thompson doing Napoleon. This is a caricature of Thompson. And this is the stone. He sent me, Dr. Mills sent me the stone. It was probably put on by his brother. And the whole grave was at one time, roped in with, concrete and everything. And then both cemeteries took all that away. And, he definitely has a marked grave, so we didn't have to worry about that. So now, people now know more about Launt Thompson than they once did. When I went to NYU, when I was first doing the research, and even all the professors didn't know who he was. And these are really knowledgeable people. The only one was the chair of the department at the time, Joe Lee, who's, Joe Lee, he was very casual kind of guy. And I said, Launt Thompson? He goes, "Of course I know Launt Thompson. I know. He's a great sculptor. I know him." I said, "You're the only person I've spoken to who knows anything about Launt Thompson." So now, people are gradually learning more about him, and I'm hoping that there's going to be some more, research done. As I said, my research was, very, off the top, kind of skimming the top, and there's a lot more depth to go through. Now, one time, everybody knows the American actor George Clooney, right? he has he was of Irish descent, like me, a couple of generations removed, and not very Irish, but he decided one day he was going to go to Ireland. He'd never been there before, and he went with his wife, and he had relatives in Abbeyleix. So my Irish colleague grabbed him, and they just shamelessly said, tried to give him the story of Thompson, and he took it. They gave him some of the stuff I wrote and this wrote, and he took it all, and he said, maybe I'll make a movie of him, because he produces movies too, and he was thinking of starring himself as Launt Thompson, of course. And then it even made the Irish Times, the whole thing that George Clooney is going to do a movie on Launt Thompson. This was a couple of years ago, or maybe 1 or 2 years ago, and it hasn't happened yet. But those things do take time. So that's where we are now. If you want any details, there's a whole lot more of Thompson's work, which I wasn't going to cover here because that just gets boring. So you can read it at your leisure. But if we do get this, exhibit, we're going to start here. Then we'll go to New York City. And I spoke to the Consul General, Maiden, and he agreed to it. Now the other thing is, Thompson's brother-in-law, I'm sorry, he became the Bishop of New York, the Episcopal Bishop of New York, and he was the founder of the Cathedral Church of St. John the Divine. They have an art exhibit room there. So I didn't go to them yet, but the rector of the church is a guy named Malloy, which is kind of an Irish name, I think. And I haven't gone to him yet because I don't have anything to, concrete offer. So as soon as I hear anything from the Irish government, I'm going to try the Cathedral Church of St. John the Divine. And then they were supposed to go to Abbeyleix and another place. And at one point, the people of Abbeyleix had a member of British Parliament, a Viscount de Vesey, whose family founded Abbeyleix. And apparently the family was, pretty benevolent for an English family anyway. And they had him on their website, and they interviewed him, and he was kind of a good talker, easy to listen to. And he said, well, my family started in the Reformation. And he said, when everybody was Catholic, we were Catholic. When they were Protestant, we were Protestant. We just went with whoever was winning on the winning side, and then the Protestants, so we became Protestant. So he now is a member of the Parliament in England, and I think he's an in-law or something of the royal family. So, yeah. So, okay, so that's pretty much where we're at now. And how much time did I take?
We might take some questions.
Oh yeah. I didn't want to go over.
So if we.
So on Zoom, we're going to maybe do some questions now and answers. I have already questions from Facebook. That was great. Really, really interesting. And I think it's amazing how the society that he kept and the people he knew, to know Edwin Booth, and all of these other kind of millionaires and industrialists. It's amazing. Come in because I want to hear you on Zoom.
In New York in the mid 19th century, 1800s, the Astor family was the big family. They were the social empowerment. Everybody heard about that, right? People would kill to get an invitation to one of their parties. Launt Thompson was a regular dinner guest. One of the sons, Waldorf Astor, there was a hotel later named after him. He was an aspiring artist, and they asked Launt Thompson to teach him, and he was the only pupil Thompson ever took on. But he didn't really have, that much of a desire for it, so he left and he went to England and bought his way into an aristocracy and became a lord of some sort, whatever. But it's like he made friends with everyone. If you can make friends with the Astors and be invited to their home for dinner, you're doing pretty well. So there's a lot more of those little anecdotes, but I think I'm running out of those.
I know there'll be questions. So one of the questions on Facebook was, we had two, where was the asylum? I think it was Middletown, was it?
Middletown,
Yeah.
His records, which they refused to give me. Yeah, it's privacy. He died in 1894. When are they going to loosen up a little? And he has no descendants. His son died during World War One. He was working for the army, and his two daughters had no children. They both married, but they didn't have children. His daughter became a sculptor, Mariette, and she was friends with Duchamp and Brancusi, and she had shows in Paris. She married an American businessman named Mills also, and they were expats, and they lived in Paris in the 1920s. Then they came back after a while to America. I think she had an exhibit in MoMA too. Yeah, so she was pretty good.
And then we're just double checking Launt Thompson was not Catholic.
No, I never got his birth certificate, which I probably could get if I wanted to, but what would it tell me that I don't know already? He was probably, I guess, what they call Anglican.
Yeah.
We call Episcopal here,
Yeah.
and that's probably what it was. I never heard him ever going anywhere near a church, so except for the one, he did a few busts of Christ. We don't know where they are. The Century Club has them listed, but they don't know where they are now.
I had a question. I can't remember who was from. And one of the questions was, who was he? This protege of that man, his son was called Launt as well.
Oh yeah, he was named after him. Yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention that. Yeah.
Okay, good.
He was the best man at his wedding.
So yeah, this George said exactly that. How do you get from Lancelot to Launt? Launt is called.
It's a nickname, I guess.
Yeah, and he was E.D. Palmer's son's middle name, any connection. So yeah,
That was he. He was named after him. And Palmer was the best man at his wedding, which was in Troy, New York, not far from here. Yeah.
Cross the river to bring your passport. Does anyone here have a question? Yeah. So Jack is in the audience with us, and he had read the article in Irish American. Did you say there was something? Because I have to repeat your question for the benefit.
His wife got so enamored with everything Italian that she would stay there, and she loved it. And the children fought with the Italians in World War One. She became Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
There was
Just a question about his wife and her love of Italian living, and actually she converted to Catholicism.
There was an article written in the New York Times 20 years after Launt Thompson's death, and the title of it was "Mrs. Launt Thompson Wants to Get Permission from the Pope to be Cremated." And this, to me, it didn't make a whole lot of sense, but she said she was afraid of premature burial. So she wanted to be cremated, and I said, if you don't like premature burial, you're not going to like premature cremation either. I think it would be even more unpleasant. It's faster, yeah, that's true. I don't know whether the Pope ever gave her permission. I highly doubt it. Yeah, but this 20 years after his death, they wrote an article in the Times with his name or her name. And when he did die, it made every paper in the country. Every major city, had his death in it. And some of them, they didn't even know by that time he was so, removed from the art scene that they were saying, well, poor Launt Thompson, But the point that I wanted to make when I spoke before and when I wrote in something, is he wasn't like, it wasn't poor Launt Thompson. He wasn't a loser. He wasn't, defeated. He kept going. He kept fighting. He kept working, even through mental illness. I mean, it's just the same as, if he had cancer or something, he kept working. So I feel that he's not, a pitiable character. He's an admirable character, and his life, hopefully, maybe will be used somehow in the way we're revising the way we look at mental illness now, and try to understand more about it, and he may be some kind of standard bearer for the future.
it's kind of a pity that they won't release his record so that we could know, like, was it manic depression or what, you know?
Isn't that concerned because this is 1894?
Yeah.
What do they know? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, did they know manic depressive? Did they know, you know, their cure was a straitjacket? So I don't think it would have helped. That's why I didn't really fight. I could have fought. I think Liz Allen did get his records, but you know, she wrote 20 years ago. So I don't know if she still even has her notes. You know.
Does anyone else on Zoom have a question for Michael?
Dr.
Jack.
Yeah, Dr. Armsby was such an interest in when he started into medicine and then moved into sculpture. And, his bust is in Washington Park, but it's not by him.
Okay, so Jack has just said there's a bust of Dr. Ormsby in Washington Park, but it's not by Launt.
That's in the book here.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah.
And the Albany Institute has one of the statues.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was a major
I'd like
figure.
to know what his mother's maiden name was, and I'm trying to read that.
Elizabeth, we are hearing the questions from the audience.
I'll repeat the questions when they're asked, but sometimes there's just talk.
Oh,
The
okay.
question was, what was his mother's maiden name?
St. John Tucker. It's hard to see.
St. John
Elizabeth
Tucker.
St. John Tucker.
That might give us a hint as why she, as a widow, came to Albany.
All right, so Jack is just saying because the mom had connections in Albany, who are the St. John Tuckers, you know, in connected to here. Yeah, because she came here, like, so she must have, you know, so we might be able to find her here, yeah.
It appeared on the
Siobhan said, I
tombstone,
hope-
yeah.
Yeah, it's on the
Her
tombstone.
name, yeah. I was
Exactly.
asking,
Siobhan said, I hope the island he ended up in wasn't dreadful.
I was wondering if Michael
Go ahead,
could
sorry,
tell us
Jack, yeah.
again where it was in Providence, Rhode Island, that absolutely terrific sculpture of the general is located.
City Hall. And matter of fact, that reminds me
Thank
of
you.
another thing. General Tecumseh
Burnside.
Sherman.
Burnside.
No, but at the time of the unveiling, General
excuse me.
Sherman's march to the sea.
Yeah.
He was there, and he was so impressed with the statue that he took Launt Thompson in his buggy, and they tore around the park. And it was like apparently terrified Thompson, who was supposedly insane at the time, was sane enough to be scared. And Sherman didn't bother him. He was like driving like a madman or something.
Actually, I mean, this is a technical question. I don't know if anyone has the answer. The dead general that he sculpted, didn't they normally, you know, you were on a horse or the boots are turned backwards, or is that an American? Yeah.
If you were wounded in battle, I think one leg was up.
Yeah.
If they were killed, two legs were up. So the horse was up.
Was general standing and he was not on a horse? Yeah, like where's the horse? For that
Yeah,
one?
no, that one, he wasn't an equestrian. The only equestrian one was Burnside, who was not killed in battle.
Okay. And then Siobhan said, I hope the asylum that he ended up in wasn't dreadful. Can you talk a little bit?
It's still there.
Yeah.
And
Was it called a state hospital or something?
it's homeopathic. I have it in the notes. If you wanted, you know, I can, homeopathic asylum. Yeah. And
And of course, like as you say, the techniques were not good. Like it was ice baths and straitjackets, and you know.
Will told me that some of his ancestors were psychiatrists, and they worked there. And you know, he said that he didn't know whether they actually treated Thompson or not. But you know, apparently it was kind of a for the time, a more enlightened place, humane place. But I don't have any real background information on it.
So, guys, if there's no more questions on Facebook or Zoom or from our in-house people, you're all satisfied. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I'm so sorry for the start. It's a bit of a nightmare when you're juggling, you know, phones and laptops and iPads and all kinds. We have two different laptops going. Thank you, Michael, for coming up. It was absolutely brilliant. And, we do hope that the exhibition will happen, and we'll certainly host it here. And we're back on... Not next week, we have nothing but meetings next week. The week after, the Monday, I think it's the 26th, we're back with Brad Edmondson, who will talk about the Adirondacks and the formation of the National Park and all that. And then on Wednesday, I think that week, I'm giving my talk on the centenary series of the Irish War of Independence. And of course, this is the month that we celebrate the truth of the War of Independence. Oh, Siobhan Stout is from Laois, I never knew. So yeah, up Laois. It's a lovely town, Abbeyleix. It's a kind of a landlord's town, you know, there's a gated estate, you know, it's quite wealthy. Okay. Yeah. Well, don't listen to that bit. So thanks very much, everyone, and we'll see you, I hope, soon. And have a great night. Stay dry. It's terribly rainy in Albany. Be good. Thank you all.